Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column News. It is the 10th of July 2014 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, no, not really. Louise Collins, Brian Gerrish and Mike Robinson are here in Plymouth, and I'm not with it because it's really stuffy in here again, and no air. What's it doing outside though?
Well, it's sort of sunny, bit drizzly at times. We've got a report Cornwall is, I've lost it now, cloudy and sunny in Cornwall. That's about as much as I can give you today, but Louise is right, it's pretty hot in this studio. So it's also getting hot for Obama, and of course this is a subject which the BBC and the mainstream, so-called mainstream press in the United Kingdom simply do not want to report. What can you tell us, Mike?
Well, indeed, because it's their stooge, of course, and Obama continuing problems over the possibility of impeachment, it seems like the Republican Party aren't quite going for impeachment on the floor of the Congress at the moment. In the meantime, they're supporting Boehner's lawsuit against Obama. So he's bringing a lawsuit. Basically, Obama, as we've mentioned many times before, is absolutely subverting the rule of law in the United States, just as Cameron is over here. And people are getting more and more irate about it. So I believe that this is an attempt by the House Leader Boehner to really avoid an impeachment situation on the floor of the House, and so he's attempting to take a lawsuit out against Obama. Some quotes here. Representative Peter King told the Huffington Post that he believes that the lawsuit is a very reasonable step to take. We believe the president has been violating the law and going around the law, and so they're going to put this into a court with a corrupt judge because that's the right place for it after all. No?
Well, pretty similar system to UK, or maybe the same system driving events in America as well, as many people believe. Well, back home, of course, our faith is in King David.
Exactly, yeah. Well, he doesn't want people striking, and he's going to announce a crackdown. Today, National Union of Teachers go on strike over pay and pensions. Along with the teachers striking, council and health workers, firefighters, civil servants will also down tools. Cameron spoke out yesterday saying the time had come for a threshold in the number of union members who need to take part in a strike ballot for it to become legal, and that a Tory manifesto could support a time limit on how long a vote in favour of strike action would remain valid. Cameron told MPs that he doesn't think strikes are right and people should turn up and get on with their work. And big old Boris seems to support Cameron over all these strike actions, but I know Mike has a lot more on this.
Well, not a lot more, but before we move on, did you say something about a threshold there?
Apparently so.
A threshold? What threshold was there? What threshold was there when he was elected?
Yeah,
very small one,
yeah.
Right. So he requires a higher threshold for people to take strike action than he required in order to become Prime Minister. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I really wanted to highlight this report here, this article here, which is an opinion piece by Grant Shapps, a Conservative MP, of course. Disruptive school strikes should be declared illegal, and he was having a real rant about how children's education was really being damaged by this strike. One day. Well, 1 day of strike action, as opposed to how many non-pupil days do pupils have to put up with if he's arguing that a day off school is disrupting children's education. And really, the point that I wanted to make here was the teachers should be entitled to take action if they feel is necessary. But at the end of the day, it's not teachers' action which is resulting in falling educational standards. And really, for me, one of the things that sort of highlights this is if you go back to what children were reading in the 19th century, and look at the text density and look at the standard of the language that they were reading. If you go back to the pamphlets that were used to organize people for the American Revolution and look at the text density, look at the standard of the language that they were expected to read, and this was considered to be for mass consumption, and look at the standard of reading and the standard of literacy in 21st century Britain and 21st century United States, and then ask the question, have the standards of education in this country got anything to do with teachers going on strike for 1 day? I don't think so. So I think Grant Shapps needs to get to wind his neck in a bit and wise up. But let's just remember what this is really about. I will not let you destroy our children's education. That's my job, says David Cameron, and that's absolutely the case, I think.
Yeah, and we should also remember, of course, that Michael Gove was the man saying, well, we don't want an investigation into, proper investigation into paedophilia in the establishment and Westminster. So if we look at who's got close to our children, many of them very unsavoury people, and there is growing evidence which simply says the objective has been to dumb down children in Britain in order that it's easier for the ruling elite such as Mr Cameron to do his stuff. We'll continue to report on that.
So finance then, a bit of good news from the United States, 600,000 people signing a petition for a 21st Century Glass-Steagall Act. This is in support of the legislation being brought forward by Senator Elizabeth Warren. And so, you know, what can you say about this? People are demanding bank separation in the United States. They recognise that banks are still too big to fail. In fact, too big, they're even bigger than they were in 2007. And they recognise the fact that bail-in seems to be the policy of the day. And so they are absolutely demanding that Congress acts on this. And good to see that happening. It's a pity that we're not seeing the same momentum building behind this Glass-Steagall and the Bradbury Pound over here, but that's up to us to organise. But less good news for the financial sector, at least, is the fact that yet another JP Morgan banker has committed suicide. This is he actually shot himself after he shot his wife, and this was not just a sort of till attendant. He was a senior banker for JP Morgan. He has worked for JP Morgan for several years, most recently as executive director of its Global Network Operations Center. And prior to that, he held various positions with JP Morgan Chase and other companies. So yet another person from JP Morgan committing suicide.
How many is that now, Mike? Do you know?
I don't know exactly how many, but it is certainly, yes, absolutely, yes.
But it's all a coincidence that these bankers are suddenly committing suicide. Nothing to see, no reason for it. This is just part of normal life.
Got to ask what is going on within JP Morgan, and perhaps this gives a hint, because here we have another bank about to go under, and this is the Portuguese bank Espírito Santo. And it has to be said that Espírito Santo's creditors are extremely concerned that there's going to be a bail-in over this. The central bank has assured creditors that they are protected, but of course they don't really believe that. Bank shares tumbled more than 14% today, and its bonds dropped to record lows. Should the Portuguese situation continue to deteriorate, this is according to Adrian Miller of GMP Securities, should the Portuguese situation continue to deteriorate, risk aversion contagion could quickly spread to other Eurozone member states' bonds and other asset classes. So another demonstration that they have done nothing to sort out the financial system. They've done nothing to fix it. It's still as bad as ever, if not worse than it was in 2007. And I'm just going to say it again, 2007 was not the main event. It was merely a pre-shock. The main event is coming. They know it's coming. They intend that it should come. And that's why I'm pleased to see 600,000 signatures on a petition for Glass-Steagall in the United States. We should have the same pressure coming to bear in this country quickly.
Indeed. Well, what's happening in UK at the moment? Of course, the subject is many people are finally waking up to the fact that we're being governed by liars, cheats, criminals and paedophiles. And it's obvious that the truth is beginning to bubble up to the surface, and we're seeing the panic in the faces of our senior politicians. But it's also interesting to watch what is actually happening in the mainstream media. And of course, it was the BBC that stepped forward to start to attack Mr. Dickens, the original MP, who started to release files, the Dickens dossier, on paedophiles operating in Westminster and the British establishment. So sort of thing we can expect from the BBC, but very interesting to see that the Express here is now able to tell us that the paedophiles are also operating in the British Armed Forces.
Yeah, they are. According to the Express, a Freedom of Information request has shown that Army personnel are being arrested at a rate of one every fortnight for downloading child pornography. 47 soldiers, sailors and airmen have been referred to prosecutors since 2011, with 21 convictions to date. Within that same time frame, 39 personnel have been arrested for rape and sexual assault, with 7 being convicted, and approximately 20 have actually been allowed to stay back in post. So what do you think about that, Brian?
Well, I think it's very interesting that one of the papers has actually delved in with a freedom of information request to get this information out. Of course, we've got to be realistic about it. Problems do go on in the armed forces. But how fascinating that just at the time the spotlight is coming on, not media people, but Britain's politicians and members of the establishment and their activity in paedophile rings, so all of a sudden we get the spread sideways. No, we're going to have a look at the armed forces. Well, Mike, if you just be kind enough to bring that one back on screen for us. Let's also remember that it was the British government that approved Satanism for use in the armed forces. This was the BBC report. Of course, they'd be keen to report Satanism, saying that a warship in Plymouth, I think it was HMS Campbell, they had decided it was okay for one of the sailors to do satanic ceremonies on board, and this has set the precedent for British armed forces. So this is to do with government policy on what happens in the armed forces. Could it just be that as a result of government policy, which clearly appears to be pro-paedophile at the moment, we've now started to see this spread into the military? However, we are going to say, let's clean up the mess in Westminster first, and then we'll see what needs to be done with Britain's military, with the people who at the end of the day are putting their necks on the line in the front line. And we've got a bit more to do with the paedophiles here. Quite a lot more, in fact.
A lot more, yeah. The Independent are focusing here on the desperate measures families are having to take back in Cambodia just to survive. The article here focuses on a 14-year-old girl called Danae, who at the age of 10 was sold to British paedophile for $750. Michael Leach, who was a former actually Ofcom worker and government advisor, who is actually now serving 12 years in prison, kept Danae locked in a bedroom for days at a time. The selling of virginity is currently rife in Cambodia, with many police, corrupt police being involved with all the selling for children.
A bit similar to Britain then.
Exactly.
So the paper's pointing at Cambodia saying, my goodness, this is disgraceful, but we got the same thing happening in Britain.
The thing is, in Cambodia, the parents are allowing it to happen just purely to survive, but they're being bribed with money because they can't feed their families, so the only option they're having to do is sell their daughter's virginity to escape. And here's the story that originally came out about here's Michael Leach. This is the gentleman who little Danae was sold to, and as we say, he is now serving time in prison. And the
BBC can get its noses into Cambodia here, so trust the BBC. We're not going to look inside our doors, but we are going to report on everybody else's everybody else's problem. So this really leads into the fact the establishment is beginning to creak in Britain.
Yep, okay. So Terry Shute, who was a detective constable with Mercy of Police and involved in the 1992 arrest of social worker and PI founder member Peter Wrighton, which here he is there. He's spoken out about letters that were found at Mr. Wrighton's home that had links to establishment figures, senior clergy members, and according to Mr. Shute, the letters were investigated by many important leads and they were not followed up, and that covering up for the establishment was far more important than looking into the paedophile ring that was going on at the time.
Yeah, so what's the British government doing about things? Well, aside from using NSPCC, which we reported on yesterday, of course, it's this lady that's suddenly become the focus of attention. I apologise for the photograph, straight out of the Telegraph. The Home Office has apparently been ordered to hand over more details of what's been going on, as the titles of the 114 missing files. Well, this is all nonsense, isn't it? Documents quite clearly destroyed, hidden, and now we're having a little bit of who's got the missing file? Do we even know what the name of the missing files was? This is a pure smokescreen, of course, and many people believe that if you look this lady straight in the eyes, this is exactly the person who has been brought in to help the government cover up its dirty little secrets. Well, some people say this lady comes from a legal dynasty. She's the priestess, effectively, and the key man, Sir Cecil Havers. And he happened to be the judge in the trial of the last woman to be hanged in Britain. We'll come back to that in a second. But here we are, daughter Elizabeth Butler Schloss, former president of the Family Law Division, and many people believe her to be the head of the female Freemasons in Britain. Now, we're not sure whether that's correct. Perhaps somebody could tell us, but that's the allegation.
So that would make her a high priestess then?
I believe that will put her somewhere in that bracket. Okay. So the big man, head of the dynasty there, Cecil, well, he made a substantial error, according to many press reports, in the trial of Ruth Ellis. So this lady was hanged, but he made sure that the jury didn't see information as pertaining to how she had been treated, which led up to the circumstances where she murdered a man. So it's the usual thing. We've got to trust our judges because they're infallible, apparently, and don't worry about juries because they're a bit of a nuisance. So Elizabeth Butler Schloss in the press for making errors during an investigation into abuse connected to the Anglican Church. Cleveland, many people allege that there was a warning that went to the parents, don't speak to the press or you'll lose your children. And then, of course, in the 7th of September 2006, she was apparently made Deputy Coroner of the Queen's household, a very important job which led nicely into her initially chairing the Diana inquest until June 2007 when she handed over to Lord Justice Scott Baker. I don't know whether you want to comment there at all, Mike? Or?
Well, of course, the reason she handed that over to him was because she had attempted to run that inquest without a jury. She'd been taken to judicial review by Al Fayed because he was demanding a jury inquest. And when he won that judicial review, she felt that she had to resign from that inquest because she didn't really know how to handle juries.
Yeah, well, she's a judge, so I mean, she wouldn't really understand juries or the fact that actually they have the job of making decisions in court. But anyway, some interesting progeny. Nigel Havers, the actor. We've got another son. Philip has also Queen's Counsel. Sorry, I catch up with myself. And then we've got Michael Havers, and this is the man connected with the case around Sir Peter Heyman, the paedophile diplomat. And apparently there's been some scandal for the husband as well, Joseph Butler Schloss. And according to the internet, at least, the News of the World front page, News of the World, I think this is front page on the 17th of July, 1988, was making allegations about some sexual sleaze. So it's the usual story, trust us. This was the BBC reporting on the fatal errors made by Cecil Havers. And at the end of the day, this lady went to her death with the jury having been denied critical information about why she did what she did. Welcome to justice in Britain. But if this lady's coming under pressure, she says she won't quit.
No, she won't quit. Well, as everyone knows, we don't know what each other's stories each of us are covering. But I picked up on this morning. And obviously another Baroness, they're always there somewhere. Former top judge Baroness Butler Schloss has been picked to chair Theresa May's inquiry into the paedophiles in Westminster. But Simon Danczuk MP has spoken out and thought the scandal and brought into the public domain. And he's saying he has concerns over the appointment of Butler Schloss by saying she has a conflict of interests as her brother, Sir Michael Havers, was Attorney General during the 80s at the height of the scandal. Echoing Mr Danczuk's concerns is Alison Miller, a lawyer representing some of the victims. Sir Michael Havers, father of actor Nigel Havers, came under fire back in 1980 after attempting to stop the late Geoffrey Dickens, the MP who originally gave the dossier to Leon Britton. And he came under scrutiny because he didn't want him naming Sir Peter Heyman as being a paedophile. Amazingly, dear old Baroness Butler Schloss knew nothing about her brother's involvement in this. And I found this article from the 1980s, which we should have. Yeah, here we go. That came up, and it came from Ottawa Citizen. I couldn't find it on any old UK press, but I did find it on the Ottawa Citizen where it is explaining about Heyman's involvement.
She makes mistakes. She doesn't know about juries, and she doesn't really know what her brother is up to.
She had no idea about her brother being involved back in the 1980s, even though he was within the government.
Right, okay. Well, we'll follow it through because we have another little bit of the story here. This is Michael Havers, Conservative, former Attorney General, Lord Chancellor, and this is to do with a spy case around a guy called Jeffrey Prime. Was working for GCHQ and been involved in the military as well, and he was busy passing secrets to the Russians. And it then turned out he was involved in Pi as well. Well, as the text says, excuse me, in a written reply to Dickens on the 15th of November 1982, Thatcher denied that Jeffrey Prime should be a Pi member. I understand that stories that the police found documents in Prime's house or garage indicating he was a member of the paedophile information exchange are without foundation, and nothing was discovered to suggest he was. That was reported in The Guardian on the 16th of November 1982. And in 1983, The Sun reported that Jeffrey Prime had been a Pi member, and that angry Americans were convinced that the Attorney General, Sir Michael Havers, had held back from mentioning this to avoid embarrassing security chiefs. Sir Michael Havers then complained to the Press Council, and his complaint, surprisingly, was upheld after The Sun failed to produce any evidence of their claim. And the Daily Star then followed on. So here we are, but material disappears. We don't want to embarrass anybody, particularly the security services, and he can appeal against the complaint.
I think it was, is her son called Michael as well, because it's her brother. Yes. My story was on the brother, so the son's called brother, the son's Michael as well.
It's confusing here, I have to say. There are a lot of them, so there may have been a slight error here. We will check this after the programme.
Yeah.
But as we say to people, please research yourself and double check what we are saying. The articles in relation to those individuals are correct. So here he is. Here's the man who's speaking out, Simon Danczuk, MP. And as Louise indicated, these are some of the things he's saying at the moment. 8 months after a report was published, Lady Butler-Schloss had to issue a 6-page addendum in which she apologised for inaccuracies, which she admitted arose from a failure to corroborate information which was given to her by senior Anglican figures as part of the inquiry. So you're put in charge of an inquiry in a senior position as judge, and you forget to do your checks. Bit more to follow on that one, Mike, if I may. And this is the other bit. Downing Street said David Cameron, the Prime Minister, stood by the appointment of Lady Butler-Schloss after it emerged her late brother was accused of a whitewash over a paedophile case. In the early 1980s, Sir Michael Havers, then Attorney General, was accused of a cover-up when he refused to prosecute Peter Heyman, a diplomat. She commands the very highest respect for her professional expertise and integrity, Mr Cameron's official spokesman said.
Do you know who's coming to mind after reading this and who she reminds me of? She's another like Lynn Homer, being moved in just to mess things up. I mean, this is,
Well, mess up is a bit unkind, I think, is to smooth things over.
Things over and mess things up as well, I think.
Yeah, both.
Yes.
And if there's anybody out there not convinced about the credentials of this woman, well, go on YouTube where you can watch her making an apology in the House of Lords for making false allegations that she received death threats from Fathers for Justice. So you can hear her again saying, well, I wasn't properly prepared and I was a little bit mistaken, and I'd like to apologise. I did apologise to Fathers for Justice because they didn't actually make any death threats.
Oh, she was looking a bit wobbly back then. I mean, now age kicks in and what have you, and I mean, she could be making a few more mistakes and could be forgetting a few more things.
I think that we should put her in contact with Lord Falconer.
That's a good idea.
Because Lord Falconer believes that when you get a bit doddery and you don't really know what you're doing, and we're about to do that in a minute, then you should be eased out gently. So we'll put them in contact and see if they can both resolve each other's problems. So that brings us nicely to the BBC, and well, thank you very much whoever did this. Somebody posted a very, very interesting 1 minute, not the 9 o'clock news clip on YouTube. We're not allowed to play it because that would make us television-like, and we will have AppVod crawling all over the studio. But this is part of the opening scene. This is genuine material, not the 9 o'clock news. And it shows figures stealing children, kidnapping them. And when they've kidnapped the children are bundled into a lorry. And when the lorry drives off, this is what it says on the side. So we are going to say, concerning Jimmy Savile and the rest of the paedophiles, did anybody know inside the BBC?
Apparently not.
Well, they absolutely did. There we are. BBC covering up, government covering up, but also, I believe, the Foreign Office.
Yes, because it's not just dossiers relating to paedophilia that are going missing. The Foreign Office has been accused of a cover-up after ministers, this is records of flights passing through an overseas territory used by the US, and of course, where we're talking about Diego Garcia. And this is to do with rendition flights. And apparently the documentation over these rendition flights, which may be of use to a future inquiry, have been lost due to water damage. And as you said earlier, Brian, perhaps that's because they were sitting beside the tables as people were being waterboarded. But nonetheless, they have been lost due to water damage. At least in this case, they know what happened to them.
Water damage is a good one, isn't it? Does that mean somebody took them to the toilets and they were washing their hands and they splashed them, or did they flush them down the toilet? What we've got here is a pack of lies from successive governments involved in criminal activity, fiddling of expenses, known to ordinary people as stealing, paedophilia, starting wars overseas, and if we need to do a little bit of torture to help things along, then we're going to do that. But of course, we need to destroy the evidence, in this case, water damage.
Maybe they were put in a waste paper bin outside in the park somewhere and it rained on them.
What you're not suggesting, as our Tory friend, and with that his name goes out my mind, I'll come back to that. But yes, I know the one you're talking about. It was the Sun that reported it. Well, there are many, many good people out there, and this gentleman seems to be doing some useful stuff at the moment. Zach Goldsmith. Many people are surprised at this. We're going to watch him closely. But actually our praise went to this gentleman, Michael Murrin. And he's been writing emails to many people. This is the one to Mr. Goldsmith. I have had information passed to me which I've not verified. I'm asking you to look at it and come back to me to advise as to its veracity. I have been told that Dame Butler Schloss was the chair of the highly secretive Cabinet Office Security Commission up until 2005. I understand that the role of this commission is to examine what actions need to be taken in the case of leaks in security in government organisations. Is that right? I further understand that steps are being taken behind the scenes to shred security service archive material related to paedophile links with politicians and the security service role in the use of paedophilia for the purposes of blackmail and, in particular, the control of politicians. If the information concerning Dame Butler Schloss is correct, then is it credible to expect her to act impartially in her proposed role in investigating child sexual abuse linked to the political establishment? Your very early response would be appreciated. Yours sincerely, Michael H. Murrin. Well, this is just the sort of stuff, in our opinion, that's needed because it's taking the battle straight to the desks of the politicians. And many people believe, and I certainly believe, we are starting to see the cracks in the establishment. You will begin to see these people breaking ranks and squealing in order to save themselves. So the more pressure on the MPs, the better. Thanks to Mr. Murrin's email, we did a little bit of homework on the Cabinet Office and we came across this document. Remember, Francis Maud is the Minister of Transparency for King David, and so this is probably straight out of his empire. Cabinet Office, Public Bodies, 2010, and we went and had a look for the Security Commission, and we found it is vacant, nobody at home. So the terms of reference for the Commission to investigate and report on the circumstances in which a breach of security is known to have occurred in the public service and to advise whether any change in security arrangements is necessary or desirable. The Security Commission was originally established by the Prime Minister in 1964. During 2009-10, the Security Commission was under review and appointments to the body lapsed. The Minister for the Cabinet Office announced on the 14th of October 2010 that the government had decided that the Commission should be abolished. Keep it on screen there, Mike, because we've got a bit more to add. But quite clearly, the government seemed to be aware that there was a little bit of trouble coming, and so we need to get rid of the very body tasked with dealing with leaks. And of course, Mr. Murrin's question, was it Butler Schloss who happened to be chairman, seems to be very pertinent. But they've also got other panels. Here's the Security Vetting Appeals panel, and this is to do with appeals against the refusal or withdrawal of security vetting. If people are unsure about security vetting, that's when the Secret Services delve in your background to make sure you haven't been naughty by drinking too much, womanizing, or toy boys, or prostitutes, or cocaine, all the good things they do to make sure that you're a trustworthy person. Clearly they don't get involved with the Westminster, but Sir George Newman does earn £785 per day in order to check the backgrounds. Oh, perhaps he doesn't.
Gobsmacked.
Well, of course he does, because otherwise how could they blackmail people?
Well, this is true. So we better bring up the last of these committees we'd like you to have a look at. And here it is on screen, the Committee on Standards in Public Life. And we were just intrigued to find that the gentleman there at that stage was Sir Christopher Kelly, getting a mere 50 grand per annum. And we believe it's the same man who just happened to be the then chairman of NSPCC. So we have a nice little circular situation developing where we have NSPCC people who were apparently there to look after standards in public life, but their team is now being put on charge of committees looking at paedophile activity with people who should be looking after standards in public life.
Who's in charge now? Do we know? A look at who's in these positions now?
Well, the gentleman who's in the seat at the moment is a banker. So, well, it's good news. Here he is. Well, yeah, the new NSPCC chairman. Here he is, and it's Mark Wood and AXA, and he's big in insurance. But he's been very keen on the work of NSPCC for many, many years. So we are highly suspicious of what's happening with NSPCC and their people put in charge of independent inquiries. We think I think it's known as a dog's breakfast here. And why would this occur? I think it's to do with drips.
Well, indeed. This really demonstrates how desperate these people are, because this is the Data Retention and Investigation Powers Bill. And this is emergency legislation, and let's just see what Cameron had to say about it. It's the first duty of government to protect our national security and to act quickly when that security is compromised. As events in Iraq and Syria have demonstrate now is not the time to be scaling back on our ability to keep our people safe. The ability to access information without communications and intercept the communications of dangerous individuals is essential to fight the threat from criminals and terrorists targeting the UK. No government introduces fast-track legislation lightly, but the consequences of not acting are grave. I want to be very clear that we are not introducing new powers or capabilities. This is not for this Parliament. This is about restoring two vital measures, ensuring that our law enforcement and intelligence agencies maintain the right tools to keep us all safe. I'm not sure who David Cameron thinks us is, but what this boils down to is that they are claiming that the European Court of Justice struck down regulations enabling the communications service providers to retain communications data for law enforcement purposes for up to 12 months. So unless they have a business reason to hold the data, internet and phone companies are required to start deleting it, which has, they say, the government, that is, says it has serious consequences for investigations which can take many months and which rely on retrospectively accessing data for evidential purposes. And the other point that they're making is that the law was unclear, and so the service providers themselves were asking for clarity. So all of a sudden, how many days after this paedophile scandal breaks, we now have the situation where emergency regulation is being rushed through Parliament with all party support to continue the snooping agenda on people.
And apparently the snooping is pretty useless because they snoop, but they don't seem to pick up that there's paedophile traffic going around between people in positions that affect Britain's security. So it's getting quite confusing because we're spending billions on facilities at GCHQ. We're able to, supposedly the state is able to monitor millions of emails and telephone conversations an hour. But when they monitor them, they don't actually seem to be able to detect anybody that's doing naughty things with children. It's confusing, isn't it?
Well, that's right. But you just keep in mind that we're completely safe here because this bill includes a termination clause that ensures that it falls at the end of 2016, so that the next government, whoever that might be, if there is a next government, will have to look again at the bill and see whether they want to continue it.
See how to keep us safe. We'll just remind people it was Jack Straw, of course, that got somewhere in the region of 400,000 Secret Services files on troublemakers and subversives in Britain destroyed. Why would you want to do that? Maybe because you're running the subversive programme yourself. Well, do we trust King Cameron? No. Not
at all. Now, last week, this slide isn't relevant to it, but last week we did mention that Cameron, as a result of the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta, is intending to bring the whole business of Magna Carta back into schools and teach our pupils, our school students, all about Magna Carta. Well, this is absolutely, we warned that this has probably got to be seen in terms of the constitutional reset that they're attempting to bring through at the moment, this constitutional reform agenda that's been going on since 2010. And this slide really is typical of it because this is from 2012, I believe, where Cameron was calling for a new Bill of Rights, as if the current Bill of Rights wasn't good enough. So, of course, in 2010, Nick Clegg was given the task of running the constitutional reform agenda, and Scottish independence is a part of that. The House of Lords reform, which failed so far, is another part of that, although there's been quite a lot of House of Lords reform over the years. Well, it seems that the agenda is right on track because the Commons Political Reform Committee has become a public consultation on what they're describing as Britain's sprawling mass of constitutional law. It said a written constitution was one of three possible options that could form the basis of a new settlement, a reset perhaps. As well as a fully written constitution, they are suggesting two other options for discussion: a constitutional code, which would be a document sanctioned by Parliament but without statutory authority, which would set out the essential elements and principles of the Constitution and the working of government. And the other possibility is a Constitutional Consolidation Act, a piece of legislation that would consolidate existing laws of a constitutional nature, the common law and parliamentary practice. Graham Allen, the Labour MP who chairs this committee, has said we are living through a period of considerable democratic change and upheaval, as if that's something that's happening by accident. So this is an extremely dangerous development. They intend to replace the rights, liberties and principles upon which this nation is founded. They intend to replace the common law. And I think that's absolutely clear if you look at the history of the constitutional reform agenda. But the other thing that I just wanted to highlight was this little article in the Telegraph: our liberties must not be given away lightly. A written constitution would create more litigation and require the judiciary to pass judgment on the on the constitutionality of legislation. Now, this article is mainly about the HMRC story that we covered yesterday, and what I really wanted to say to the Telegraph here is that while I agree with much of the sentiment that's in this article, I absolutely take issue with the notion that our liberties must not be given away lightly. They must not be given away at all. And in fact, we should be fighting tooth and nail to reclaim the liberties that have already been taken from us. And we got to reverse the drips.
Yeah, definitely. we go now?
Well, solution, I think, is the one that should come up here, which is
I do
the
apologise.
British Constitution Group.
Of course. So I'll just remind everybody that the British Constitution Group is still there. It is still operating. It does need more support. It needs more people getting active. And so if you're not aware of it, please get in touch. You can get in touch through the contact form on the website. And John or Justin will be in touch in contact to see what you might get involved with. But please get involved, because this is probably the time that the British Constitution Group is needed most, when there's such an attack coming on the Constitution, on common law, and they're attempting to overlay this European style of governance and in fact United Nations style of governance on us. We need the principles that this nation is founded upon reinforced, reasserted, not reset.
Yeah, well, we just reinforce that point. If anybody is talking about reset of anything to do with the country, if it's reset, as far as we're concerned, it's on the other side. The term has now been taken by the One World Government Brigade. If you see or hear reset being used, you can safely assume you're looking at the other side bringing in its agenda. They'd like to get rid of us, and they want us to forget.
Well, they do. Professor Theo Boer, who is a veteran European watchdog expert on assisted suicide, has admitted he was wrong to support euthanasia. The assisted dying bill is due for its second reading in Westminster next week, and that would allow doctors to prescribe poisons to terminally ill and mentally ill people. But Professor Bauer said he takes a very different view now, as euthanasia is now becoming so prevalent in the Netherlands that it is becoming a default of dying for cancer patients. Here's the figures, he said that deaths have increased around 15% a year since 2008. He continued to air his concerns by highlighting that there was an extension into the scheme to include demented or depressed people getting onto the assisted dying list.
So this is the Nazi agenda. If you're mentally ill, you're disabled, you can't work for the state, well, we're going to help you go through a system.
Exactly. And of course, look at the rise in the figures. If we can have that slide back up, Mike. Look at the rise in figures on what it is now. Apparently 2013 figures aren't available, but it's right up there. Over 6,000 assisted suicides going on in the Netherlands at the moment. The figure shows us today the Netherlands, almost 1 in 7 deaths are at the hands of doctors over there. And, well, who knows what's going to happen if the bill is approved in Parliament. It's second reading next week. I think they go through 4, don't they? 3 or 4 readings before they get passed.
Well, unless they don't need to bother with that at all and they just sort of bring it in.
Yeah. So just very, very quickly,
we're going to get our brains scrambled.
Barry Everett is a Cambridge professor in neuroscience, and he told the Federation of European Neuroscience that his research in rats had found that targeting memory placidity in the rats, he was able to reduce the impact of drug memories, and that his research could offer a new method of treating drug addiction. The research showed that when drug memories are reactivated, they enter an unstable state, and by obstructing a brain chemical receptor, they can erase the memory. They also found they were able to weaken drug use memories by altering particular genes. So who knows? It's just messing with the heads, transhumanism and all the rest. It's
not nice.
It's not nice.
Okay, well, we're going to end on a good note. We're just going to come back to the power of the written word, and we'll bring you back to Mr. Murrin, who had actually sent another email to Mr. Goldsmith, MP. Many thanks for your response to my email. I'd also like to make known to you that I am investigating over 6 reports of subversion and suppression of police investigations by the intervention of the security services, the Office of the Attorney General and the Prime Minister's Office. I have 1 verified report confirmed by a senior former police officer. I spoke with him personally. I have further reports which came via the civil service. I spoke with the source personally. These are not second-hand reports. From where I'm sitting, the inquiry set up by Cameron looked to be designed to cover up and suppress the allegations concerning senior politicians. I'm also investigating a report of suppression of a criminal charge against a senior judge which is relevant to current events. I state again that if the corruption within the political establishment is not dealt with now, then this society will collapse. I trust that you, Mr Watson, Mr Danzuk, Mr Hemming and like-minded parliamentarians will not shrink from your duty to properly represent the interests of the people you represent and the wider interests of this country. I'm totally serious about this, and I will in due course produce a report detailing every allegation of corruption that I have received. I will name names and stand by the report. It will include allegations of drugs money having been used as a bribe to change government policy, the corruption of the Office of Attorney General 1980s, and the corruption of the Office of the Prime Minister. Many of these allegations are historic but are relevant today. I will, whatever the financial cost and whatever the personal sacrifice I have to make, see this through. I will do so not because I'm pursuing a political agenda, nor because I'm a subversive. I will do so because this country cannot go on like this. Corruption corrodes democracy. The real subversives are those in positions of power who engage in it. Yours sincerely, Michael Murrin.
Nice.
So Michael gets our vote. This is exactly what's needed, which is action by every adult man and woman in this country to take on the liars, cheats, criminals and paedophiles who are running the country. So there's still some politicians who think potholes in the road are the most important subject. I think we've shown today that's not the case. And before we finally finish, a mention for Robert Greene, of course, the campaigner trying to protect children against abuse and, of course, to obtain justice for abuse victim Holly Gregg. Robert Greene is still under house arrest in Warrington. He still has not had any full and proper trial. He still does not know the charges against him. But I can tell you that on the 16th of this month, there will be a hearing in Scotland, which is now apparently to decide whether there should be any further proceedings against him. And we'll report on that in more detail next week. And if I've got the statistic right, Robert points out that since 2010, when he was first arrested by the police for trying to protect children from abuse, he has now had to report to a police station more than 200 times. So if you're a politician, a lord, senior judge, member of the establishment, BBC, you can be out there committing the crime of paedophilia and child abuse and nobody comes near you. Robert Greene under house arrest as a result of trying to protect children. It's pretty easy to see what's going on. Now, Mike, are we producing a programme tomorrow? I think the answer to that is not.
No, we're going to take a day off tomorrow. Apologies for that, but we've got other things that we've got to get done. And so we'll be back on Monday.
Can I just say, next Friday at Westminster, there is a child abuse rally organised by an incredible woman called Mumsy, and they'll be outside Westminster House of Parliament from about 11 o'clock. I think they're meeting near Nelson's Column around 11:15, but then they're going to go down to Westminster. And again, it's very peaceful, just handing leaflets out, raising awareness of what's going on in the big house and around the government. So that's next week.
Okay,
we'll get that up.
I'll have the flyer
forums.
up next week. Yeah,
okay.
Next Friday, 11 o'clock.
Okay, well, we'll leave you from a very hot studio. If you think that Louise was hot today, I'm going to tell you I was pretty hot as well. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.